Hey, I'm Liz Wald. It's Web3 Wednesday. This week I want to talk about DAOs and decentralized governance. So, a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. And Web3 as a whole was really born from a lack of trust in centralized institutions and organizations. So, blockchains use something called consensus protocols, proof of work, proof of stake, and the like. NFTs use smart contracts, if A, then B sort of thing. And DAOs use a decentralized consensus. And what they all have in common is that they all function in what we call a trustless environment. You do not have to have trust among people for activities to happen. So DAOs can be used to perform a lot of different tasks and use different tools to do so. So, for example, DAOs can be used to approve open source protocols. What are we going to add to this blockchain? How is it going to function in the future? People in the DAO vote and then the changes happen. It can also be used to manage leadership. Who are we going to take in or who are we going to remove? And it can also be used to help determine a roadmap for the future. Now, this is done in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's done through something called governance tokens. And there are a lot of structures for those. You can have one token, one vote. You could have one token, one vote, but no more than X number of votes regardless of the tokens. There's lots of different structures. You can also use something called multisig wallets, where you need more than one person or persons to sign a wallet in order for something to happen. So unless many people approve, the thing does not occur. You can also have a voting contract that once a certain number of people have voted, that contract goes into effect. There are delegation systems. There are lots of different tools that you can use to make a DAO function. But you have to remember that at the end of the day, people create DAOs and they have to make trade-offs. So what are some of these trade-offs? Well, there's a bunch of them here, and I'm going to link to a really great article that goes into these areas in depth, as well as explains kind of the history of DAOs and how they work. So, early versus late stage member power. This is a really interesting one to think about because, hey, if a bunch of us create the DAO early on, should we maintain the overall power for this DAO, or should people who join later get that power as we grow? Decentralization versus efficiency. You know, everyone loves the concept of decentralization, but it's a lot more efficient when you have one or two people who represent the voices of many others, which is what we do in government, for example. Stabilization versus growth. Now, do we want this to be a very stable DAO in the sense that it's not going to change in terms of what it's supposed to do over time, or is its mandate going to grow? This maybe comes down to, do you have a leaderless, completely leaderless approach, or is there leadership, and are they helping drive decisions? As much as we might like to think that we can function in leaderless societies, there aren't really great examples of that happening. Whereas on the flip side, we see what happens when too much power is concentrated in a particular leader. Short-term versus long-term priorities. That one's pretty self-explanatory. You know, things change quickly. Are we going to adapt what we think is important for this DAO? Knowledgeable versus unknowledgeable. This is tricky because this technology is complicated and not that many people are really familiar with how it actually works, the cryptography and the like. Also, there are business and legal implications on top of that. So if we're only going to allow the knowledgeable to make decisions, it will be a much more limited group. At the same time, if we let everyone make decisions, there may be bad decision making because of a lack of knowledge. Finally, there's this concept of nothing at stake versus hyper financialization. And essentially what this means is, can anybody join for essentially no cost, or are we going to have a very high bar? And some of the reasons you may decide to go one way or the other is, are you worried that somebody might come in and create thousands of fake identities and kind of take over the DAO, something that is often called a Sybil attack? Or are you not so worried about that? And therefore, we don't want to have a very high financial hurdle for people to join. So these are just some of the trade-offs that people make and why DAOs are not kind of a panacea or answer to all governance questions. But at the same time, you can see how these tools do have benefits and can make certain things a lot easier going forward in these trustless environments. So we'll see how this develops over time. And again, I will link to this article, which I think really did a great job breaking this down, if you want to dive in a little bit deeper on DAOs and decentralized governance. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week on Web3 Wednesday.